Our final speaker today comes to us from the UK, across the waters. And who we have is the chairman of Bromley Brow Roads Action Group in London. And yeah, what the heck? It's on the screen, you can read, okay. He's going to be speaking on traffic calming in London. This is an opportunity to hear about tens of thousands of calming devices and their impacts that they have had on emergency response and mobility in England. And in this particular case, don't bother welcoming him. He isn't here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Roger Lawson, and apologies for not making it to Atlanta in person due to unforeseen circumstances. What I'm going to talk about is traffic calming in London, and hopefully you'll learn some of what we've been doing in the UK. Just to give you some background, I'm chairman of a local transport pressure group in Borough of Bromley in London. I have travelled in the USA, so I'm pretty familiar with your problems, although I always found travelling there was a lot easier than in Europe historically. I've been to Atlanta quite a number of times. Like most people, I've changed planes in Atlanta. So anyway, I shall move through the slides, and I'll mention each slide number as I go through it, and the slide number is in the bottom left hand corner of each slide. So moving to slide 2, this is a map of London. As you know, it's one of the largest cities in the world, and I live in the southeast corner there in the borough of Bromley. Moving to slide 3, this is one of our local roads, which is where I first got involved in traffic calming issues 7 or 8 years ago. This is a road called Manor Park Road. As you can see, it looks fairly quiet and leafy, so to speak, but in the rush hour it's much busier. So moving to slide 4, this is another picture of the same road further down. As you can see, there's a pub on the left hand side, and behind that there is a large school. To the right, opposite the pub, is of course the church, and there is of course a lot of pedestrian traffic from the pub to the church and vice versa, and you get school children crossing the road as well. So the next slide, picture 5, is a picture of the church. So moving to slide 6. Why did people want traffic calming in this road? Well, firstly, there were some road safety arguments. Secondly, there was a desire by many residents to remove traffic, which has increased over the years, as in many parts of the world. And also, I think there was a fear of speeding traffic in some cases. Moving to slide 7. These were some of the methods that have been used in the UK. Pinch points, chicanes, these are road narrowings or artificial twists in the road. Mini roundabouts, which I'll show you a picture of later, which are used extensively. Speed humps, of course, speed cameras, we have lots of those. Speed display devices, which are fairly new in the UK, and I'd certainly recommend them. We'll look at some of those later. And 20 miles an hour, and what are called home zones. Home zone is basically a residential area which has more intensive traffic calming measures, typically road closures, road engineering, wide area, 20 miles an hour speed limit, etc. And then the latest thing is what's called self-describing roads, where you artificially engineer the road to possibly look more dangerous, so that people slow down, but of course not make it more dangerous. So moving on to slide 8, this shows the first attempt at traffic calming on Manor Park Road, which was a pinch point with a gateway treatment, so that people, trucks can't get through this, and even ordinary cars have to slow down unless you want to scrape the sides of your car. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks after this was installed, there were 2 fatalities caused when a truck rolled up to the stop, to the pinch point, not realizing it had been built recently, braked sharply, and a motorcyclist with a pillion rider ran into the back of it. One of the people killed was a resident of my street, in fact. So since then we haven't had more pinch points installed in the borough of Bromley, but they did not remove it. Moving to slide 9, this was the second attempt at traffic calming, which was put in about 4 years ago now, and this is a full width hump. Further down the road we have what are called cushions, which are these small square humps which buses and other larger vehicles can straddle. But as you can see, if you look at this road, before the hump there are several gouges in the road, and this is because vehicles either brake very sharply just before the hump and wear the road away, or they bounce over the hump and scrape the other side. So this shows you just how much extra road maintenance is caused by these devices, and that was only after a couple of years of usage. So moving to slide 10, in terms of Manor Park Road, this particular road we've been looking at, these were the claims that were made, that school children would be safer. There is a large school nearby. Claims that the road had excessive accidents. Residents wanted to remove traffic, as I mentioned. Alleged problems with crossing the road by pedestrians. And there were environmental claims that introducing speed humps would reduce the noise and pollution. Moving to slide 11, taking those points in turn, if you look at the accident figures, in reality the chance of an accident to a child outside a school is in fact probably lower than it is elsewhere. There are very few accidents to children outside schools. It's a myth that it's a particularly dangerous spot simply because you've got lots of children there. I think there are a number of reasons for that. One is that they tend to be supervised more. Certainly in the case of Manor Park Road and the school nearby, when the school children are there, all the parents are coming along to pick up their children via car. We don't unfortunately have school buses in the UK, believe it or not. So you get this horrific traffic jam for about half an hour twice a day. So in fact the road is actually, there's no speeding traffic because it's totally clogged up when the school children are there. So I think that's another reason. Moving on to the other claims that were made, if you actually looked at the accidents in this road, and typically when people ask for traffic calming measures, they often rarely study the accident statistics in detail. But if you study the accidents in detail, as I did on this road, most of the accidents were actually at the junctions at the end of the road where it joins 2 main roads, and they weren't speed related. And all the accidents were very slight ones. A slight accident in the UK has to be recorded, although many aren't because people don't bother. If they fall off their bikes and scrape a leg or whatever, if there was a policeman nearby, they'd report it. But if there's not, it never gets reported. And clearly trying to cut out that kind of accident is exceedingly difficult and not very cost effective. Moving on to the next point, traffic was reduced when they introduced these speed humps, but in fact what's happened is that the traffic all moved to another parallel road, as you'd expect. So in reality all that happened was the noise and pollution was actually shifted onto somebody else. So this is the typical sort of selfish approach I find in many local traffic calming schemes, where the residents just want the traffic moved on to somebody else. Not a very good approach in my view. There was a view that the road was difficult to cross by pedestrians, although even when I was more disabled, I never found it a problem. And in fact, the best answer to that would have been a zebra crossing. A zebra crossing, if you know where, is just a pedestrian crossing marked by by black and white stripes. I think there was one on the cover of Beatles album some years back that became well known. You know, nobody suggested that, so I think it's a shame. Looking at the noise and pollution issue, in reality, with speed hump schemes, you typically get more air pollution. Whether you get more noise or not is very depending on the type of vehicles. It can actually make noise worse, and particularly for people who actually live immediately alongside a hump. So, moving on to slide 12, if you want more information on speed humps, you know, typically the more you learn about them, the less likely you are to support them. Then go to our website, which has a section dedicated to humps. And the kind of problems you get with humps that weren't really obvious when they were first brought into use was, firstly, there are lots of disabled people who have major problems with speed humps. People with bad backs, you know, I recently saw a survey that said 1 in 10 people in the population have some sort of back problems. But if you've got severe difficulties, you know, severe arthritis or recent abdominal surgery, that kind of thing, then driving over speed humps is exceedingly painful, however slowly you go. And I get numerous complaints from people, and I've talked to many people worldwide on that subject. Unfortunately, the advocates of speed humps tend to discount it, you know. Secondly, I've already mentioned that they do tend to cause more pollution, they can cause more noise, and they certainly cause more vibration. I mean, I've had a number of people talk to me in the UK whose houses have been damaged by vibration caused by adjacent speed humps. They cause more road maintenance costs. They increase your road maintenance costs very significantly. Of course, the key point is that rarely, if you take into account the traffic diversion, rarely do they significantly reduce accident levels, particularly of severe accidents. You know, you have to look at the statistics carefully and study them to take account of reversions to the mean and that kind of thing. But it's a fallacy that speed humps significantly reduce accidents. One of the other major problems with humps is they delay emergency vehicles. Now, I think Les Bunt is going to talk more at the conference about this in terms of the US experience. But for instance, in London, Sigurd Rainton, who's the chairman of the London Ambulance Service, recently said that he thought up to 500 extra deaths a year were caused in London because of delays to ambulances. Now, it's debatable whether that figure is accurate or not, but he certainly didn't believe that there were a significant number of deaths caused. Unfortunately, London has one of the worst ambulance response times in the world. You know, if you want to have a heart attack, have it in New York, not in London, because chances are the ambulance won't get you on time. So he has a major problem, and clearly anything that makes it worse, he's going to talk against. He did subsequent to that call for more research on the matter, but I haven't seen any research being done. Also, of course, ambulance staff have major difficulties because often they have to try and treat people on the way to hospital while the ambulance is going over these humps, and that causes major problems for them, apart from the fact that because they tend to ambulances tend to have fairly poor suspension systems because they're often based on truck chassis, and they have to drive at speed over humps, so therefore often ambulance and fire staff, fire engine staff and police cause injuries to themselves. Anyway, go to our website, which is the address is given on the slide here, and you'll see a lot more information. Moving to slide 13, in fact, speed humps can actually cause accidents. This is a picture of Old Hillchislehurst near where I live, and a picture of Anya Skodowski, who last year was riding a cycle down this road. It's actually a moderately steep hill, came around this corner which is fairly blind, and as you can see it's got dappled shade which makes it very difficult to see the road surface clearly, and there is a speed cushion in the centre of the road. You probably may not be able to see it in fact, but it's just in front of the van. Anyway, she didn't see it, rode straight over it, got tipped off a bicycle, landed on her head and spent 3 days in hospital with a broken jaw and other injuries. Now this was actually the sole serious accident that has happened in this road in quite a few years, and it was caused after the humps were installed. So that just shows you the negative impact of humps on accidents. Moving to slide 14. Why were speed hump schemes popular initially? Well, I think in the UK they were seen by the government as a simple and low-cost measure to reduce road accidents. Unfortunately, politicians are always looking for simplistic solutions to road safety problems. And the other thing that happened was that excessive speed was demonized by certain pressure groups, and the government, for instance, ran campaigns saying speed kills. So it was a sort of simplistic view that if you cut traffic speed you could reduce accidents at a stroke of the pen, so to speak. So they were supported by experts and often recommended by road traffic engineers. Even though the public came to oppose them, unfortunately we have this system in the UK that many boroughs, although they will do public consultation, they often take the view that consultation has to be moderated by the expert opinion, so they can actually reject votes that vote against it. So for instance, recently on the London congestion charge, the mayor decided that even though the majority of people voted against extending the London congestion charge, he was going to plough ahead regardless. So democracy is not as perfect as it could be in the UK. Okay, moving to slide 15. Certainly the mood is changing in the UK. For instance, Kenneth Clarke, who was the government minister who introduced speed humps and is still active as a politician, said that recently it was pretty much one of the biggest mistakes he'd made. Several London boroughs have adopted a policy of removing humps, or in Bromley we have a no more humps policy. Technically, for legal reasons, we've adopted a policy of a preference for non-vertical deflection traffic calming devices. In fact, one of the reasons why we're not actually yet removing them is Bromley doesn't have any money to remove them, because it costs as much money to remove a hump as it does to put it in. Anyway, certainly councillors are now sometimes standing for election on anti-hump platforms, so the mood is definitely changing against humps. Moving to slide 16, the other approach that has been totally getting out of hand in the UK is the use of speed cameras. Again, this is a focus on speed as opposed to more specific road safety measures. So in Bromley we have 12, which is relatively few. I've actually studied the accident records for the sites in Bromley, and they have not improved the road safety record of the streets they're installed in, and the national statistics are certainly very misleading. If you know anything about statistics, and I did study statistics as part of my university degree, I think it's very doubtful whether speed cameras have a positive impact. You can see that, in fact, if we move to slide 17, this is a chart of fatal accidents in London over the last 10-15 years. You can see that up to about 1995, accidents were falling quite rapidly. Fatal accidents, this is, of course. The graph, incidentally, is similar for the whole of the UK. And the reason why it was falling was that generally in that period, quite significant amounts of money were spent on road improvements. So after that, there was a switch to this anti-speed approach to road safety, and very little money is now spent on road improvement. And the result, of course, is that accidents have almost leveled out. I mean, if you looked at the figures over the last 10 years, it's doubtful whether there's any statistically significant improvement, and certainly it's doubtful whether they'll meet the targets. Now, that's even after there have been major improvements to in-car safety. Everybody's wearing seat belts now. Child booster seats have legally just been introduced. Rear seat passengers legally have to wear seat belts. That kind of thing should have improved matters substantially. So in fact, the enormous amounts of money spent on speed cameras and speed humps has been totally ineffective in reducing fatal accidents. Let's just have a look at some of the traffic calming measures used in the UK. Moving to slide 18, this is a picture of a mini roundabout. These are often now introduced instead of having a T-junction, for instance, where the main road is continuous. They are introduced at a T-junction so that traffic even on the main road has to pause and slow down to go round the mini roundabout. As you can see, in fact, a mini roundabout, it's not even raised, so you can often drive over them, as you can see this Jaguar has done. It's quite difficult in a big car to actually get round them. And hopefully you won't meet drivers who try to do a U-turn at these things, which is impossible. But they do tend to cause lots of minor accidents, a bit like four-way stops in the US, where you can get sort of deadlock when nobody's quite sure who got there first. Even though you have to give way to the person on your right, that can be debatable. Anyway, they can improve road accident figures in terms of injuries. The minor ones tend to be just damage to vehicles. Moving on to slide 19, these are picture of speed display devices or speed advisors, and the one on the left is a permanent one which is sited just below, just in front of a sharp bend, and basically just warns people if they're going too fast up towards the bend. Obviously that helps drivers who are not familiar with the road, just to warn them. The one on the right is a mobile one which they can move around, but incidentally it's surprising that these devices are effective over a long period of time. In other words, people don't get used to them. They're not speed cameras. I mean, if you exceed the speed limit, there's no penalty. It just warns you that you are exceeding the limit. And in fact, they're very effective at reducing the speed of traffic. So I'd certainly recommend those, and they're relatively cheap, a lot cheaper than speed cameras.
Well, one of the nice things about him not being here is we can cut him off without hurting his feelings. The rest of his presentation was he was going to show in his workshop, and he combined the two and went overly long.